And we are live with another edition of the All Gas No Break Sports Show. I am one of your co-hosts, Nicholas Pavona, joined alongside once again by my co-host Andrew Johnson, as we are now through 10 weeks of this year's college football season, and as of tonight, November 5th, we will find out in just moments what is going to be the first college football playoff rankings for this upcoming 2024-2025 season. As of this moment, Johnson, they're actually about to reveal it right now, so in real time, as of this recording, we will be finding out the rankings for the college football playoff poll, and it's still been a wild season to say the least.
Yeah, I'm excited to see what the top 12 teams are going to be. We have a feeling what they're going to be, but let's before we kind of make idiots out of ourselves, let's wait for them to actually reveal the poll. I think that's the right course of action here.
Yeah, once the poll revealing is done, I have it currently on my background on my television, but once it's fully released, we will break down the top 25 and what the committee was thinking going into their logic going into this past week, and I already see it. I already got one of those like instant reactions to one team that just got ranked. Wow, that's based off of Johnson what just happened this past weekend. So that will actually tie into what we're doing right now, which will be recapping what happened this past week. And let's start off with a huge game that happened in Happy Valley between number 4 and Ohio State versus then number 3 Penn State. Now in this game, early on, it looked like Penn State was in the driver's seat, Johnson. They forced a pick six on Will Howard. They went up early 10-0. It looked like maybe this was finally the year that Penn State was going to beat the boogeyman and beat Ryan Day and Ohio State. But then Ohio State gets a touchdown to near the end of the first quarter. They go into the second quarter trailing by a field goal. They then take the lead in the second quarter, had an unbelievable interception to end the first half to keep this game at 14-10 going into halftime. The defenses really showed out throughout the rest of the way in the second half, and none more importantly than in the late stages of this game, Penn State gets within maybe a yard or two of the end zone to try to tie the game at 20 apiece. Ohio State was able to get a goal line stand backed up into their own end zone, was able to run out the last 5 minutes of this game, and they hold on to beat Penn State once again as they win this game by the final of 20-13. Both teams now going to 7-1 on the season, and it's a unfortunate big collapse for Penn State, Johnson, because this was a game they more than likely could have had, and they let it slip through their fingers.
Say it with me now. James Franklin. Repeat after me. James Franklin.
James Franklin
cannot win the big game.
Cannot win the big game.
Yeah, it's just that's been the theme. I think that he's 1-8 now in these type of matchups.
Has not beaten Ohio State since 2016.
Yeah, so this is crazy now. So I don't know where you go if you're a Penn State fan, because clearly it's a catch-22 situation. Because if you get rid of James Franklin, you run the course. You run the risk of not being that perennial top 10 team that you always are every year. But if you swing for the fences, and let's say, what if Urban Meyer wants to come coach Penn State? Then of course, you send them packing. But unless you have a surefire top 10 head coach to come coach a university, I think you stick with James Franklin. Unfortunately, unless you have that guarantee that we're going to get this guy, like it's written it's written in stone, then you go for him. But if not, I think you just have to deal with him for now.
I think the thing with Penn State is like we know Franklin's a great recruiter. Penn State has gotten some great talent these last couple of years.
He's also a hometown guy. He's from the state of Pennsylvania.
Played.
Listen, I don't want to cut you off here, but hometown guy. He's from Pennsylvania. He played at East Stroudsburg. He got his coaching gigs in Pennsylvania when he first started, and then it's kind of like his homecoming because he's a head coach of Vanderbilt. Then he immediately leaves to go to Penn State because it's a dream job for him. So it just kind of makes sense that he was the guy that kind of to try to hopefully bring him back to glory, but it just hasn't happened. He peaked 10 years ago of Saquon Barkley now.
Yeah, I was. What I was mentioning is that Franklin, I talked to a Penn State fan over the past weekend, and what they've been, what they say is the truth. Great recruiter, always gets this amount of talent. They just cannot win the big game when needed the most, and that's been the unfortunate circumstances for Penn State these last couple of years. Now, the good thing with this 12-team playoff format is that they still have a good chance to make the college football playoff, even with this loss. The downside for them is that they more than likely, depending on if Ohio State were to lose, have taken themselves out of the Big Ten championship game. But if they don't lose in the remaining three games of the season, or 4 games, excuse me, I'm doing my math wrong. If they don't lose their remaining 4 games of this season, then they should be in the college football playoff. They just have to get the work done throughout the rest of the way.
But yeah, I think we can go into our second game here, and let's talk about my Aggies. Unfortunately, getting the beatdown of a lifetime at the hands of the Gamecocks at home. This was an absolute tragedy. You lose Le'Veon Moss for the year. It's just bad vibes right now. You definitely can still make the college football playoffs, but now you have to beat Texas. Like, it's not even a maybe. You have to beat Texas, so they're kind of on the outside looking in right now. But if they beat Texas, they can still get it. But that's such a tall task. So it's bad vibes. Really
well,
have to.
I can tell you. Yeah, go ahead. I don't want to interrupt. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I did find out where Texas A&M is ranked, so we now know where they currently are ranked in the CFP.
Are they 15?
So they are 14. So
14.
We'll break
okay,
down.
That's not terrible.
It's not terrible. They're still. I wouldn't say maybe they necessarily have to beat Texas. They might just need some teams to lose along the way. Need help. And then, but they might more than likely have to beat Texas, or they at least just have to play in the Big 10. The Big 12. I'm still can use them in the Big 12. They still have to play in the SEC championship game, but keep in mind, Georgia's got to play Ole Miss this week. Georgia also has to play Tennessee. Those teams have one loss, and then Texas A&M. It really might come down to Johnson. Georgia playing Tennessee. That winner goes to the championship game, and then Texas A&M's game is going to play the winner of that game. So those 2 games are probably going to determine who plays in the SEC championship game this season. And even LSU still has an outside shot if they beat Alabama this upcoming weekend. But going back into this game, it was a rough performance for Texas A&M on both sides of the football. Lenora Sellers and Raheem Sanders were unbelievable in this game for the Gamecocks, a team that we knew was scary going into this one, and we knew this could be a trap game for the Aggies, and that was certainly the case.
I don't really have much to say on this besides South Carolina. It always plays spoiler every single year. There's no off days in the SEC. We've always said that before. And, Texas A&M, they just got caught here. And you have to really tip your cap to South Carolina at the end of the day. And it's a dog-eat-dog world here in the SEC. And now, as an A&M fan, I hope they go undefeated throughout the rest of the regular season. I hope they beat Vandy. I hope they beat Mizzou, Wofford, and Clemson to cap off the season, because that would make it a good loss for the Aggies. But as it stands right now, it's looking pretty bleak.
All right. Well, what's also looking bleak now is for a team that also going into this week, Johnson, had a good chance to make the college football playoff had they now lost a game throughout the rest of the way, and that was the Clemson Tigers. And with the way the rankings have just gone now, as I currently still look on, this loss for Clemson is more catastrophic than I thought it would be after the week ended. They more than likely might be done. They would need a miracle and a half, it looks like, to get into the college football playoff. Now, that's because of what happened this past weekend against Clemson against Virginia Tech, Louisville. I'm getting my games mixed up. They're playing Virginia Tech this upcoming weekend. Their last game was against Louisville this past weekend, and they were just beat on every single side of the ball in this game, Johnson. Offense could not get anything going in the first half. Their defense was really, really struggling, and they just looked really horrible in this one. And unfortunately for them, it probably just cost them a spot, not only in the ACC championship game potentially, but also the college football playoff, as Louisville pulls off the stunner 33-21 on the road against the Tigers. And now Clemson will see where they go from here if they have any chance to potentially make the CFP.
And I think we have another game here to talk about. Big game. Texas Tech with a huge upset over Iowa State. I was watching this game live, and I couldn't believe what was going on because I turned my head down for a second, and all of a sudden, Iowa State was in the lead, and then Texas Tech was in the lead. And
good back and forth game.
Yeah, and then at the very end, they get a touchdown with 20 seconds left. They fail for 2-point, and Iowa State tries to pull off a miracle in the end of the fourth quarter, but they fell short. And now Texas Tech is gets a great win of the year, and they're on their way to a decent bowl game now. And Iowa State is on the outside looking in right now for the college football playoffs.
And don't look now, but Texas Tech, it's going to take a lot to happen, but they still have an outside shot at the Big 12.
They need to win the Big 12. That's how they get it.
yeah, for Iowa State, they're 17th. They're going to be 17th now as of the CFP. So I'll spoil that now. But they'll need to make the Big 12 championship game first, and then they have to win it to make the CFP. But keep in mind for Iowa State, we mentioned their scenario last week with them as well. They still have, Kansas State at the end of the season. Utah on the road could be a tough game. So they still have some tough games to play throughout the rest of the way. But yeah, I mean, kind of a loss that I won't say I didn't expect. I could have seen this happening, but it was just really kind of caught off guard in the last second moment that this happened for Iowa State losing to this Red Raiders team. And now the Red Raiders, they're fifth right now in the standings, but they have the same conference record as Kansas State. So hope is still not, lost yet for this team as they potentially try to make the Big 12 championship.
I guess only time will tell. And Nick, I think you need to give us an update on that college football playoff poll.
All right, so I'll tell you right now, they've gotten through to this top six. The top five teams have not, actually, as I say that, they just announced number five. We're about to get the top four teams. From 5 to 25, we have those rankings. Now, if you remember how the CFP goes this year, Johnson, the top four conference champions. So there's top five conference champions. The top four conference champions all get that illustrious first round bye and don't have to play in the first round of the CFP. So for a team like, for example, BYU, who is the ninth ranked team as of the CFP, they get a first round bye because they are the highest or last. They're the last remaining highest seeded conference champion over a team like Boise State, who is the number 12 team in the country, and they're a conference champion, but they are the non-group Power 5 team that gets that fifth seed. So, for what we're seeing right now, if we had the playoff today, Johnson, the matchups we would have would be Notre Dame and Penn State as a 7-10 matchup, Texas and Alabama as the 6 and 11, Indiana and Tennessee as the 8 and 9. You have BYU facing the winner of Boise, and we're still waiting to see what the next team is. Miami, they just announced as one of the bye teams. They're the number 4 team,
which makes sense. I'm okay with Miami being number 4,
which means that we're down to Georgia, Ohio State, and
Oregon.
Oregon
should be the number 1 team going into this, by the way.
Yeah. So I think I'm trying to see because they haven't announced. I'm trying to look where they're announcing because they have Texas as the 5th team, but they're ranked as the 6th seeded in this bracket. So it comes down to the last conference champion. That's what I'm missing out on. So BYU and Miami have gotten a bye. Remember, this is all early on. This doesn't have to. This is not the actual last one. They just announced Georgia is the number 3 team in the country, but they are the number 2 seed. So what that means, Johnson, if I had to guess, Oregon's going to be number 1. They'll have a bye. And then Ohio State's going to be number 5. And they would play Boise State in the first round. I'm going to guess Ohio State's probably the number 2 team in the country.
That would make sense to me. It'd be unprecedented to put Ohio State number 1.
Yeah.
I still
especially
think Georgia should
considering
be
the
over
head-to-head
them,
matchup.
but
over Oregon or Ohio State?
Oh, Ohio State. No, definitely not over Oregon. Oregon is on a different planet right now from a lot of these
I
other
think
teams.
just because of them beating Penn State, that's probably why they did that. That's
I get the ranking behind it. I'm not like criticizing
Georgia,
it. In my opinion,
Georgia
is better than Ohio State, but based on the ranking right now, it's definitely it definitely makes sense because statistically, it just adds up.
So let me give a better description for this playoff format. So because Ohio State was the number 2 team in the country, but because they're in the same conference as Oregon, they're the highest remaining, Power 4, Power 5 highest seed. So they would be the highest non-conference champion team going into the first round. So that's why they're playing a team like Boise if the season ended today. So if the season ended today, Oregon, Georgia, Miami, and BYU would be getting the first round byes in the college football playoff. And then you'd have Ohio State, Texas, Penn State, Tennessee, Indiana, Notre Dame, Alabama, and Boise State as the last teams in, with SMU and Texas A&M being the first 2 teams out. Other notable teams, LSU is number 15, Ole Miss is number 16, Iowa State number 17. Colorado is number 20. Kansas State's 19. Iowa State's 17. That's for the Big 12 conference. You got Clemson dropping all the way down to 23. So the committee was really not impressed with that bad loss they had to Louisville, who now is in the rankings. Army is number 25, so they're still in the rankings. And then from there on, it's just other teams like Missouri,
what's Alabama
Washington
ranked?
State, stuff like that. Alabama's ranked number 11.
Number 11, thank you. I thought you said 11. So they're in the playoffs right now.
They would be in the college football playoff, yes, if the season ended today.
Kind of crazy to think about that.
And keep in mind, now we mentioned that their game against LSU could be an elimination game. I still think that's the case. I think if Bama lost, I would say they probably don't make it because they don't have any big games after LSU. They're playing teams like Mercer, Oklahoma, and Auburn. So that's not a game that's where like, oh yeah, we have to put them in the top 12. The only way they would get in is if every team above them was losing. So therefore, by default, they would have to make it. So I would still get the sense that that game between LSU and Alabama is an elimination game this week. And then A&M, the good thing for them is that they're them being number 14, they could get back into the top 12 next week if some one of these top 11 lose. But I think we get the sense that they have to be Texas that final week of the season if they want to make the CFP entirely. And then the only other note I see is, Indiana, Ohio State's going to be a big game in a couple of weeks, but Indiana needs to make sure they are still undefeated by that point. And the same thing for Tennessee because they're playing Georgia, and Georgia, they could officially eliminate Ole Miss because, crazy or not, Johnson, Ole Miss still has a path. If they beat Georgia this upcoming weekend, they're going to be in the top 12 next week. They lose, they're officially eliminated for sure. So they really need this game upcoming weekend against Georgia. But is there any comments that you have for the top 25 itself, or any questions you would want to know about in terms of teams and where they're ranked?
Who's Boise State playing in the first round?
If the season ends today, Boise will be playing Ohio State.
Man, I want to see that matchup.
Ashton Genty against
I think they have a real outside shot of beating Ohio State, especially because they played so well against Oregon, which played a very close game with a victory against Ohio State. I think that'd be a great showing for a mid-major, because I don't think that they win that game in particular, but I think they get within a field goal, which would be a win for all mid-major football teams.
Yeah, I think it comes down to if Boise just stays in that spot, because if you look at the remaining schedule for Boise, they play Nevada, San Jose State, Wyoming, and then Oregon State. You would think that's a very winnable schedule for them to get into the CFP. If they go undefeated, they're going to make it no matter what. They can't lose in the Mountain West Championship game. They have to go undefeated if they want to make the CFP. And,
absolutely. They can't have any mess ups.
And obviously, the CFP would love to have them in the college football playoff. So
because I have a question. Because what's Army ranked? What is Army ranked?
Army's number 25.
Really? They're that far out?
They're not respect. I think it's because probably the opponents they played. It has to be because of that.
So, and Notre Dame is what, 10?
Notre Dame is number 10. Yes.
Yes, Notre Dame is 10. So
if Army beats Notre Dame, then they're gonna theoretically jump a lot of spots, and they probably potentially
big matchup at Yankee Stadium in 2 weeks.
Yeah. Obviously, we knew that going into it, that Army was going to have to be undefeated to make it. But that's why Boise State's ahead, because if Army has any hope, they have to beat Notre Dame, obviously. But I'm wondering if that will be enough. I don't know if it will. I think the committee would have to move them up more spots, because them being like the last team ranked, I feel like that's what probably harms them. They might have to not only win that game, but they might need some help along the way as well.
I guess only time can tell, but I think if we're done here, Nick, we can go straight into our mushing hour.
Yeah, so we were waiting to see what these rankings were going to be. A very interesting first revealing of the college football playoff poll, and we'll have a lot more of these revealings the next couple of weeks. This is the first installation of this new 12-team format, and the first installation of this new rankings show with the 12-team format. So nice to see what this potentially could entail, Johns, for the rest of the way this upcoming season. But that is going to lead us now to the mushing hour. And last week was a week. Right? Last week was a week.
It certainly was one of those weeks in college football. It was one of the
Let's
weeks in college football. I don't want to talk about it.
so let's just say you had a very bad week.
You
A
know
week
what?
you
It
would,
started off so well too.
you know, I
I
had
really was believing Duke plus 20 and Michigan plus 14.5 were locks.
Duke was up double digits in the
I
third quarter.
I
I
can't
thought that was a
believe that.
lock.
Yeah, I cannot believe that happened. I said, okay, Duke's up by a touchdown right now. It's the third quarter. Like this should be plus
Yeah,
20. Nope.
they lose by 22 at the end.
Should have taken the over.
That was an absolute heartbreaker. Yeah, Miami games are becoming overs at this point, so that might be your pick potentially for the Georgia Tech game upcoming that we'll
Yep.
preview in a second. But yeah, I've learned that no longer taking player props. Trevor Etienne got hurt in that game against Florida, so that was a bet. And then Georgia only won by 14, so that was also a bad beat. And then at least we got the Ohio State game right? You know, sure.
Yay, yay, I got 1 for 6. Just don't listen to me, please.
5 for 5 for me last week, so I do at least finish 500, but my record is still not great. Yours unfortunately got
Listen
even
to me
worse.
for the NFL. The NFL, I'm like 10 games over. This I'm
We
doing
had a decent
horrible.
week in the
So
NFL this past week, so we'll see that. We'll be recording our
yeah,
episode tomorrow night as of this recording, November 5th, election night, for a multitude of reasons, Johnson. We'll
of
be
course, the college
glued to our
football playoff
TVs.
poll.
Yeah, that's why.
Big election results.
Yeah, that's what everyone's
Nothing
looking
else is
forward
going
to.
on.
Yeah, nothing else going on. Not whatsoever. No one's even paying attention after, especially now after the rankings were revealed. I think everyone is now
They're going to bed.
very calm and collected. They're going to bed. Yeah, that's for sure.
Unless
So
you're an
let's go
A&M
into the.
fan like me, then you're a little mad still. But that you're
You
mad
are a
at the
little bit
team.
nervous. I will say, them being 14, it could
Is
have been
hope.
way. They could have been where Clemson
I
was at
thought
because this
15. I really thought 15 was their
they
number.
could have easily been where Clemson was. Clemson dropped. What were they? 11 last week.
Yeah.
Yeah, they dropped.
Well,
They
Clemson has
dropped.
the ACC is a weak conference. They got punished for that. Well, the SEC is any given
Right.
Sunday.
I thought that I didn't think A&M was going to drop that far. I think I was just more surprised because Louisville was ranked to start the year. They haven't had bad losses this year either. Like they lost to Notre Dame by a touchdown. I thought that was I was kind of stunned that they put Clemson all the way down there. But maybe that's just only me. Maybe I'm the only one that thinks that. But if you're an A&M fan, I think you feel fine right now that you're 14, but I think you get a little bit worried that you probably have to really win that game against Texas to end the season, or you just need a lot of help along the way if you want to make the college football playoffs this year. So there's still hope if you're an Aggie fan, but we'll see. Now let's go into the mushy hour for this week, number 11, Johnson, in the college football world. And let's see if we can get our picks better this upcoming weekend. Let's start off in the ACC. Number 4, Miami at Georgia Tech could potentially be a trap game for the Hurricanes in this one. They're still undefeated. They are currently the number 4 ranked team in the country, as I mentioned, and they would be the number 3 seed in the college football playoff if the season ended today. Do they get off track like Clemson did last week, and do they potentially lose against the Yellow Jackets?
No idea because I'm taking the over. That's the only safe bet there is nowadays.
Well, especially for a Miami game. That's a lot of points, though. 63.5.
I think Miami will give up 40 points and they'll score 60. So
yeah, I've started to notice the trend that Miami, like, no matter what the over under is, they're gonna they're gonna score. It depends on what their defense is going to be accustomed to that week. I'm gonna go with Miami minus 11 as my pick. I think the aura, I guess that's the word for it, of Georgia Tech kind of wore off after 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks of the season. Miami should beat them heavily. They've had quarterback issues this season in terms of injuries. I think Miami gets this one done easily, and they remain undefeated going into Week 12. What's our next game?
we have the Florida Gators going on the road into number 5 Texas to take on the Longhorns. Longhorns at home, are a 21.5-point favorite. Over under slated at 47.5. I'm going to take the over here again because that's the only safe thing there is.
Yeah, it is a lot of points. And Florida for a majority of that game against Georgia, they were actually winning for a good portion of that game. And if not for DJ Lagway getting injured in that game, Florida might have pulled off the upset. It could have probably thrown a wrench into Georgia going back to the CFP this year. Lagway is probably not going to play this game, so I'm kind of worried about that because of that happening, I'm going to go with Texas to cover. I'm not as confident in it, but I think when you have if you have a potential third string quarterback playing in his first collegiate start on the road against number 5 Texas, that's not a well environment for you to be having your first collegiate start, at least in this level. I know he's a transfer. So I got Texas to cover in this game, but I'm not very confident in that one. So we'll see what happens. Our next game that we have on our slate is Michigan going on the road to take on number 8 Indiana. The Hoosiers are having an unbelievable season, Johnson. They would be in the CFP if the season ended today. They really need to win this game. They have to pretty much stay undefeated up until the Ohio State game if they want to have any chance to make the CFP this year. Do they get it done against the Wolverines upcoming on Saturday?
I'm not sure if they get it done, but I'm going to take Michigan plus 14. This is the third time I've taken Michigan as a two
I don't know.
touchdown underdog, and they've
Have you
spurned me 2
learned?
times before. So I'm going to do it a third time because what is it?
Third
It's going
time's
to
a
happen
charm?
3 times in a row? Yeah, third time's the charm. Lock it in.
Because you said lock it in. No, I really don't want to lock it in. I'm gonna go with Indiana minus 10. Play it safe. You know what's a funny stat about Indiana this past week, Johnson? They were trailing 10-0 against Michigan State, and that was the first time this season they have been trailing at all this year. And then they wound up scoring 47 unanswered points. So yeah, if I'm Michigan, I'm not looking forward to this game whatsoever. I think they're catching Indiana at a bad time, and the Hoosiers are they're playing for everything right now. They cannot afford to lose this game or even keep this game close because in 2 weeks' time they will be going to Columbus to take on the Buckeyes. So I got Indiana minus 10 for this game. What's the other big game in the Big Ten we have this week?
We have the Huskies of Washington going on the road to the East Coast to take on number 6 Penn State in Happy Valley. Penn State is a 13-point home favorite, and the over/under slate that's 46.5. Give me the over here. I think that's highly disrespectful to both these teams. They only have a 46.5 as the over, so give me 46.5. I feel like both these teams can get 3 touchdowns plus.
Maybe it depends on how Penn State's defense is feeling that night. That's probably what it comes down to. This should have been the night game that should have happened this past week against Ohio State. I don't know why that was 12 o'clock kickoff. That still irritates me that was a noon kickoff, and this game's a night game. It still boggles my mind that was the case. Jeez, I'm gonna go with Washington plus 14.5. I think they can keep this game close with Penn State. But Penn State, as I mentioned, they cannot afford to lose the rest of the way. The good thing for them is that they're still highly ranked in the CFP. Like they would be the 7th seed, and they're the number 6 team in the country if the season ended today. So as long as they just keep track and just win their last 4 games of the season, they're going to make the college football playoff no matter what. It just comes down to will they make the Big Ten championship game? They'll need a lot of help if that's going to be the case. So for that to happen, they need to win. I will pick them to win, but I will have Washington to cover at an alternate spread of 14.5. Our next game that we have shifts us now to the Big 12, and a surprising game, a big game in the Big 12, as number 20 Colorado goes on the road to Lubbock to take on the Texas Tech Red Raiders, coming off that big upset over Iowa State. Colorado goes on the road as a 3.5-point favorite. The over/under set at 62.5 for that game.
I'm not going to touch this over, funny enough. I'm going to take Texas Tech to cover here. They're at home, and I think they can win, at least cover by a field goal. So give me Texas
They could
Tech.
win outright.
Yeah, I think they can win outright, especially what they did last week. But I think they may be coming off a high from that. So give me plus 3.5 here, just to cover my bases.
I will go with Colorado minus 3.5. So we'll be seeing what happens between us two this upcoming weekend. I think you pointed out Texas Tech's coming off that big high, winning that game against Iowa State, and now they have to face a Colorado team that's been red hot as of late and really has a good chance to potentially make the college football playoff, especially if they're able to win the Big 12. They still need a little bit of help along the way, but I think the Buffaloes get this one done and get the victory over the Red Raiders. Now let's move over to the SEC, Johnson.
And in the SEC, we have number 3, the Georgia Bulldogs, going on into Mississippi to take on number 16, Ole Miss and Jackson Dart. When I say Jackson, you say Dart. Jackson.
No.
All right, I tried. Georgia is a 2.5-point favorite on the road. 54.5 is the slated over/under. Give me Georgia minus 2.5 here. I think they need to win this game to stay in the CFP, and Ole Miss will get relegated to probably, I don't know, the Pinstripe Bowl. I don't know.
They can't make the Pinstripe Bowl, but
I know
good.
it's ACC.
Yeah.
I know, but it'd be funny. So
Wonder if they still do the Gator Bowl. Maybe they'll be in the Gator Bowl.
maybe the Cheez It Bowl. Is that still around?
Yeah, I think so. Or the
Yeah, the
Pop Top
Cheez It
Bowl.
Bowl. Oh,
Pop
Pop
Target
Top
Bowl.
Bowl.
Maybe.
That's a good one.
I don't know what teams play in those two bowl games, but maybe they could be in that. They'll probably be relegated to maybe a New Year's Six bowl like the. Actually, no, they can't because I think those bowls have been replaced for the College Football Playoff. So I
It's the
respect that
Cheez
too.
It Citrus Bowl. Excuse me.
Yes,
They
okay.
could play in that game though. That would be a good one. Last year was Iowa number 20 Iowa versus number 21 Tennessee, where Iowa lost 35-0. So that was fun.
Yeah, I don't know what they would think of putting an SEC school against an Iowa team that can't score. That's good. That's always good. Um, Shifting our attention back to this game, I mentioned that this is obviously an eliminator game for Ole Miss. If they lose, they're out of the CFP. If they win, they just enter themselves back into the mix for the college football playoff. Unfortunately, Johnson, I don't think they get this one done. I'm gonna go with Georgia minus 2.5, and I will also be going with the over in this game. I think there's a lot of good playmakers on both sides of the ball. I think Georgia's going to struggle, surely. They very well might just win this game by a field goal, and I think it might come down to a last-second field goal. I think Georgia hasn't looked as dominant as of late, and they're catching Ole Miss when they're playing a lot better the last couple weeks, but I still think the Bulldogs get it done to keep themselves at the top of the CFP and officially eliminate the Rebels from any contention in the college football playoff. But that's not the biggest game we have this week, Johnson. As we mentioned, we have an eliminator game most likely in the SEC as well. As number 11 Alabama is going into Baton Rouge to take on number 15 LSU. The Tigers are at home, but are a home underdog. Alabama is a 3-point favorite. The over/under set at 58.5. What do you got for this one?
Give me LSU plus 3. I think Alabama wins this, but it's gonna be by the skin of their teeth. LSU is definitely not going down for a fight because they're playing for a college football playoff spot right now, something LSU hasn't touched since Ed Orgeron was there. So this is talking half a decade in the making now for LSU. So give me LSU plus 3.
This has been tough because I obviously at the beginning of the season we both had Alabama making the college football playoff, and
Yes.
if they lose this game, they're probably done. They
Yeah,
don't
I'm
have
thinking
a
LSU plus 3 because I think they're going to play with as much as they can here. But um, I still think
yeah.
Alabama wins this game, but LSU is definitely going to cover. This is going to be like a
LSU.
35-34 type game. Someone's going to miss an extra point somewhere.
God, that would be tragic. I think for me, what it comes down to it also is LSU's last big game is against Vanderbilt. They play Florida and Oklahoma. I feel like LSU, even if they win this game, they might lose to Florida in the week after at the Swamp. That could be a trap. That would be a typical LSU game for them to lose if that were to happen. I think because I took Bama at the beginning of the season to see the CFP, I'm gonna pick them to win. I will go Alabama. I'll just pick them to cover. If they win by a field goal, I'll push. I really don't care. I will go with the Tide to win this game, and I'm going to go with the over as well in this one. I think, as you mentioned, this will be a very high-scoring game. This was the case last year when these two teams, or maybe not last year, 2 years ago when these two teams played in Baton Rouge, and we kind of caught our first glimpse of how good Jay Daniels was. These two quarterbacks, Garrett Nussmeier and Jalen Milroe, will definitely need to show out and play big in this game if they want to get their team a potential step closer into making it into the college football playoff. But I do got the Tide winning it at the end of the day and keeping their hopes alive going into week number 12. But that is going to do it for this week's edition of the Mushing Hour. Johnson, any final thoughts or any final thoughts realistically about this slate and the college football playoff rankings that we have to start off for the next couple of weeks?
Yeah, there's about 5 or 6 teams fighting for their college football playoff hopes here. Alabama, LSU, one of these teams will be eliminated by the end of the week. Ole Miss has potential to be eliminated, so that's 2. Penn State, they lose this one, they're almost on the outside looking in.
As they lose this one, they're probably done.
It depends on all these other teams because, listen,
That's
if
true.
Ole Miss and LSU lose and Colorado win here, that puts them in the conversation now.
Yeah,
That
Colorado
probably
definitely
puts
getting
them
that
up to
game.
15. So it's going to be very interesting this week. And we don't have all the pieces of the puzzle yet, but it's about 85% completed right now.
Yeah, like right now, I will say I'm watching ESPN again for the CFP, and they're doing a prediction as to as to if this team loses this specific game or if they win this specific game, what their odds will be for the rest of the way. So there's still a lot to unfold for the next couple of weeks, and anything could change in the win of dime. But for the teams that are in the position that they're currently in right now, that if the season ended today, that they are making the CFP, they have to make sure that they don't lose at any point the rest of the way. And as you mentioned, there's three, maybe four, maybe even five teams fighting for their life this upcoming weekend, and a loss will officially eliminate their hopes. And for the other teams, will keep them alive and put them into position to make this first 12-team college football playoff. And I'm sure we're going to be watching every single second of it this upcoming weekend for the next couple weekends alone, because as college football fans, we love to watch stuff like this happening, and even college basketball fans, because it kind of brings us into it's kind of resembling
This is
March Madness,
March?
as I mentioned. It's kind of resembling it in a sense.
Almost, right? It's not March yet. I got to wait a couple months, right? 4 months?
Yeah, I mean, listen, like I mentioned this a couple weeks ago. Also, like they're getting into the point now of college football where strength of schedule means something for these teams. So it's like it's all a resume for the majority of the remaining, you know, ranked teams and what their schedule embarks to try to make the CFP. So I'm kind of liking this new installation of what they've done for this season, and I'm hoping that they keep it like this for years and years to come. I wouldn't even touch this the way they have the format right now.
Oh, it's absolutely
I enjoy
perfect. There's
this.
nothing. 12 teams is absolutely perfect for
I
football.
think that's the perfect. I think it's the perfect number, and the way you're doing it with the conference champions. I think even
You know
if
what I would do,
you know,
though?
yeah,
This could sound crazy. I would even consider giving you the number one overall seed 2 buys.
if
I
you
would
figure
really
out a schedule, like way to do it, you could do that. I wouldn't mind that.
and give a 13th team to make it like a 12 plus one.
I think maybe the only criticism people might have for it is not having each top four team get the bye. Like for example, like Ohio State and
Yeah, no, two.
Oregon.
No, listen. 2, 3, and 4 still get buys, but one gets a double buy.
Right. No, what I'm saying is, so like Ohio State and Oregon are in the same conference, right? But
Yep.
because Oregon is the highest ranked conference champion, Ohio State doesn't get that bye. They have to play in the first round because of
Well,
it.
listen. All I'm gonna say is be grateful because 5 years ago you weren't even in the playoffs. So let's
Right. That's no. That listen. That's true.
when your conference get a buy. I think that's
Right.
fair.
I think that's the only good thing I love about it is because it puts more emphasis on making sure you win your respective conferences,
Absolutely,
even if you're
regular
like a
season's
Big 12.
important.
Like even if you don't believe in BYU right now in the Big 12, like there's still an importance to win that conference to make sure you make to win it and then potentially get a high ranking seed. So I like it a lot. I think this is going to be a good format, and I hope they can keep it like this for years and years to come. And if they have to tweak it, you could tweak it, sure, but don't add teams, because I know like college basketball, they always every single year want to add teams, and we always tell them like don't, like just keep it the way you have it. It's perfect as it is. So
Yeah, nothing
we'll
to
see.
change here. Absolute perfect format, and I'm looking forward to many years to come of this. Hopefully.
Hopefully, yeah, hopefully. For us, Johnson, this is not our last episode of the week. Tomorrow we'll be recapping NFL and also recapping the NFL trade deadline that also happened today. So a very busy Tuesday, November 5th in the world of professional sports, and for outside other reasons that I can't really think of
Secondary
off the top
reasons,
of my head.
obviously.
Yeah, some stuff that I can't really think of off the top of my head. Maybe someone can enlighten me
Help me out
after this
later.
recording. Yeah, definitely recap us later if we forgot something, because I can't really think of it off the top of my head. So we'll see. But for us here on the All Guys Now Break Sports Show, that is going to do it for this week's edition, as we are now through 10 weeks of the college football season. We are now heading into week number 11, and going into week number 11, we have our first college football playoff ranking. So we already see a first installation as to how big some of these games so far have happened will provide for the rest of the season and what they could embark and to try and get each of these teams into the college football playoff. But as we mentioned, Johnson, 5 teams potentially fighting for their lives this week. Let's see if they can make sure they can stay alive going into week number 12. This has been Nicholas Pavona, joined alongside by my co-host Andrew Johnson for the All Gas No Break Sports Show. Have a great rest of your week.